Today we are doing a monthly reading wrap up, except it's not really a monthly reading wrap up because it's November and I haven't done one for September or October. I guess I'm going to combine both of them and just say all of the spooky and autumnal reads that I've done this year, because I feel like I'm going by the weather. Like in summer I did a summer video where I only read summer books, and now that I'm in like fall I read a bunch of autumnal books. So I feel like I'm going on beat with the environment. And so if you're looking for any spooky or autumnal, very cozy reads, I had a bunch of good ones this year, and so I wanted to share them all with you guys. First books first is Lightlark. I have a full reading vlog with spoilers of this on my other channel. I will link it down below. Lightlark is by Alex Astor. If you guys are not familiar with Lightlark, it's the book on TikTok. It's like a very controversial thing. The author, Alex Astor, said that she had already gotten a movie deal and was already on like New York Times bestseller when the book didn't even like come out yet. I'm gonna be very honest, that's what drew me to read it. The premise of the book is that it's a fantasy, and the main girl, Isla, she is the head of her sector of a kingdom, and she's a wildling. So a couple centuries ago, each sectors within these kingdoms were placed with a curse upon them. Each curse is different depending on the people and the land that you're from. Every 100 years, I believe it is, they have to duke it out on an island called Lightlark, try to figure out what the curse is, because there's a riddle to it. People compared it to Hunger Games, and I don't think that's a fair comparison, because literally Grimm is like feeding her chocolate truffles. Like the girl was fine. Like it's not like a Hunger Games situation. It's more like a mental game, I would say. It's also a love triangle. So there is Isla, and she is very instantly attracted to Grimm, who is supposed to be the morally gray character, but really he was just a sketch of a human being. He had no depth, nothing. I did not like him at all. Is that a little harsh? Possibly. He had all the right things and he had all the components without any personality. So did not like him. Then we have King Oro. Now King Oro and Isla have a very grumpy sunshine relationship. Personally, I am team King Oro, and they're trying to figure out how to, number one, break the curse, and number two, how she's supposed to protect herself, because everyone in this kingdom has powers except her. All these people are showing off, super powerful, much older than her, and she's got nothing. Isn't that the most quintessential dystopian 2014 thing you've ever heard in your life? After reading the book, I decided that I would give it 3.5 stars. I would say that the second half of the book vastly made up for the first half. The first half had me crying, not gonna lie. The beginning was so slow, I didn't care about what was happening. It just felt like everything happened in the second half of the book. I swear, if I was a girly who would DNF books, I would have DNF'd it after the first half. But I have a real problem with that, and that's my commitment issue. What I will say is, because of the vibe of the book, I do think it falls under like cozy spooky territory, so it's good to read in the fall time, I would say. The next book I read is part of a series. It's called Echoes of You by Catherine Cowles. It's part of the Lost and Found series. Her series are very rinse and repeat. Sometimes it's not a bad thing. Like sometimes I just want to read a book that like I know it's going to be happy ending, like I know the formula, because sometimes you just want to be able to consume something without being so anxious the entire time. I'm talking to you, Rebecca Yaros. Echoes of You is about a best friend to lovers situation. So it's about Nash and Maddie. They were childhood best friends, always been best friends. Maddie actually moved out of town away from Nash and was like pulling away from him. All of a sudden she's back in town. He had no idea. It was because that Maddie was involved in an abusive relationship. Although they're both very much in love with each other, they refused to sort of say anything for fear of disrupting the relationship. It wasn't a horrible book. Like it's very cutesy. It's like in this small town. It's all the people in the family as like the different couples. It's not a bad premise. It's just that I've said this before in other reviews that I've done, and it's that the plot is always the same. It's some crazy psycho person that is unhinged, and it's like, okay, like you couldn't have made a plot that had to do with emotional development or character arc. Every single book, the same plot device is that there's a crazy psycho person, either A, kidnapping, B, shooting, C, holding them hostage. Like it's just ridiculous. So I ended up giving this book 3 stars. Cutesy, but very, very predictable. The next book is actually the third book in the Lost and Found series, and it's called Glimmers of You. This is a brother's best friend, and it is also fake dating. Hayden is Ray's older brother's best friend. They have always had a kind of like a snarky type of relationship. They used to be friendly, but then it just devolved into snark. The turning point was when they found out that Gray had type 1 diabetes. So she almost died, and Caden was with her when that happened, and so he was freaked out by the fact that like something could happen to her, and so he started pulling away. Years later, they return to fake dating as a mutual way to help them both. I can't remember why she needs to fake date, honestly, but I know Caden needs to fake date because his family's on his butt about getting married because they own this like conglomerate of either real estate or like hotels. I really don't remember much about this book, except once again, crazy plot. It wasn't horrible. I gave it 3.5 stars, so I did like it better than the last book. Cute, simple, quick. The next one I read is My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey. This isn't a fall book. It is definitely a summer romance, but I did decide to read this like in September-ish. The reason that I really did want to read this book was because the premise sounded really cool. It's about this elementary school teacher, and she like puts all of her savings into renting a house in Cape Cod with her brother. And then they go there to find out that there's a dead body in their house. A bounty hunter comes in to try to figure out who killed this person. The teacher is trying to help the bounty hunter like figure out what happened to this dead man. I'd say it's more insta-lusty than I would prefer. If you know me, I love a very slow burn, and I really do not like how incredibly insta-lust this was. I know it's the trope. I know that's like an avenue that authors do use sometimes. It's just not my fave. I felt like it was more of their relationship than the murder mystery, and I would have liked it if it was like half and half, because I think the premise could have been so funny. Alas, it was just a little disappointing, so I gave it 3.5 stars. Now here's where I feel like I really took a turn into reading spooky cutesy books, because this one is called My Roommate is a Vampire. This book is about Cassie and Frederick. So Cassie is in between jobs right now. She really needs an apartment for cheap because she's currently crashing with her friend. This guy puts up a listing for this beautiful apartment for dirt cheap. I think he put it out for like $200. So nobody was taking this ad seriously because they were like, there must be something wrong with it because it's so cheap. But she's so desperate that she goes anyway, and she meets Frederick. Frederick like shows her around, and she wants to take the apartment. She's very honest, and she's like openly like, hey, by the way, you listed this at a very low price. I don't know if you know that. He acts kind of weird, but he's like, listen, you were honest to me. I'm still gonna let you keep that price. She does get weird signs about his lifestyle, so he never comes out during the day. He constantly is giving her fruit. He doesn't eat. He dresses really old. He speaks really old. Frederick's intentions are that he doesn't want anything nefarious to happen to her. He really likes Cassie. He just wanted a roommate, not because he needs one. It's because he's been asleep for a very long time, and he wants to catch up on modern day society by observing somebody who's from modern day. Eventually, she does find out that he's a vampire, and they develop a very cute relationship. I thought this book was really, really cute. It was just so sweet and kind. Their relationship was great. The climax and like the conflict was a little strange to me, but I ended up giving it 4 stars. I really did like it. I just took it as like a very cute, spooky book. I mean, who doesn't want to read about like a vampire who's trying to learn about society? It's just so cute. Next, okay. Now here's where the obsession starts, because I read Fourth Wing. I cannot even describe to you how much I love this book. I think the perfect time to read it is in autumn, because Threshing is on October 1st. It's always on October 1st. I actually just read Iron Flame, so be on the lookout for that review. Guys, I haven't thought about anything for the last 3 days since I finished Iron Flame. No thoughts, head empty, dragons up there. Fourth Wing is about Violet. She's kind of in this dystopian society where you are either a scribe, a healer, or a dragon rider, because they're at war, right? So they're in a kingdom, they have to defend the borders against attackers, and they train dragon riders to defend their borders. Violet does not want to be a dragon rider, okay? She wants to be a scribe just like her dad was, but her mom forces her to go into the dragon riding academy called Bascaeth College. Violet does not want to go there. Number one, she's described as extremely frail. Her bones naturally pop out, they break. She's extremely fragile. The Riders Academy is very tantamount to Divergent, like where Dauntless has to do all these crazy initiative things. Just to get into the college, you have to cross a parapet, and people can throw you off the bridge as you're making your way across it. And so it's about all the trials and tribulations that they make the writers go through in order to successfully get chosen by a dragon. So there's a whole dragon society, and they are unto themselves sentient and can speak and have their own language and their own societal rules, they choose to have riders. So you have to go through all these trials, and then at the end of it, a dragon has to choose if you're worthy enough. Violet is training this whole time, and meanwhile, she does have enemies in there because her mother is the general. Years ago, there was a rebellion, and so all of the people that her mother executed parents of were forced to be at this college, and one of them is Xaden Ryerson. The love of my life. I love this book so much because not only the world building is so sophisticated, I think that the relationship between rider and dragon is so special, and the fact that each person gets powers because of the dragon is amazing. Again, like I said, I read Iron Flame, and both books are 5 stars in my opinion. The next book I read is Quiet by Susan Cain, and this book is very different from the normal books that I read. This is more of a psychology book, but if you are introverted like I am, I would definitely recommend this book because it's about how we live in a world that favors extroverts and how introverts are often overlooked and undervalued, but have special strengths in their own rights. So I did a whole video, which I'll link down below, about being introverted and my experience with that. This book was where I got my main source of information about how introverts act in the world, the research that shows behind where introversion comes from, how we act, why do we value extroverts. It was a really interesting book, and it gave evidence to a lot of the things that I was feeling. If you guys want to feel seen and heard as somebody who has been introverted their whole life, 1000% recommend this book. I gave it 4 stars. The next book is Divine Rivals. Number 1, I'm obsessed with this pretty cover. Look at that, isn't that beautiful? This is a very special book because it is set up in a fantasy land with gods, and the gods are at war. However, real life is still going on, and so people are back in mainland writing about the war. Iris works for a outlet, and she writes about the war. She has a rival at her work. His name is Roman. She basically has been really struggling because she's working at this place, but her mom's an alcoholic. Her brother went off to fight the war for one of the gods, and she hasn't heard about him since. But she's been writing letters to him, hoping that it gets to him. Little tiny bits of magic exist in their world. So she keeps writing on this typewriter, hoping to get in touch with her brother. One day, somebody responds. It's not her brother, but she keeps writing to him because she is getting comfort, and he listens to her, and it turns out to be Roman. So during the day, they're bickering, and then at night, they're writing these beautiful letters together. Guys, I don't know why I'm always a sucker for like letter writing or note writing in books. I think it is so special. It's a lost art form. I loved this book so much, especially when it gets to the fact that they become more entrenched in the war. They decide to report while closer to it. Roman he loved Iris so much. And do yourself a favor and listen to Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls while you read this. So on point. So beautiful the way their relationship develops because of the element of war. I always think this about fantasy books. It's so stressful because there's so many things happening in the plot that could disrupt the relationship, but I feel like that makes the relationship so much sweeter because the reward at the end of it, after all that anxiety and stress, is that you have this beautiful, fulfilling relationship that would lasted a lot of different things. So I always have a very resistant but also gratifying relationship with fantasy books that have romance in it because it's so freaking stressful, but then it's beautiful when it happens. This is a duology. The first book did leave on a cliffhanger, and the second book is coming out in December. I already pre-ordered it. The next book I read is The Dead Romantics. Now this book, even though it takes place in spring, please read this in the fall time. It is so Gilmore Girls, Mystic Falls, and the whole premise is about very Halloween-y, very spirited things. Florence Day is a ghostwriter for a very famous author because she once released a book, it did horribly, and so she believes that she can never write a good book. So she gets propositioned by Ann Nichols to write all of her bestsellers for her, and she decides to do it. So she's been releasing books for years under someone else's name. She had just gone through a really bad breakup and doesn't believe in love anymore. So she is incapable and does not want to finish her latest romance book because she just doesn't believe in it. And so she goes to her editor, who is new. His name is Ben, and she asks for an extension. He says no. But then tragedy strikes. She learns that her dad had died back home. Now she has not been home for I think 10 years. She lives in New York now, but her hometown is like this very small, quaint, very Gilmore Girls, Stars Hollow type of town. The reason that she left was because she can see ghosts, and when she was very young, she communicated with the ghost of a little boy who had died and solved his murder. Because of that, she went to court. She had to recount everything that he had told her, and everybody basically laughed at her and humiliated her. She was traumatized, so she left her entire family behind, went to New York, and just started her life anew. But she goes back because her father's died and she has to execute his will. Unfortunately, as she's setting up for her dad's funeral, Ben shows up and he's dead. So she's seeing his spirit and she's trying not to get close to him or try to figure out what happened to him. She knows that it went so poorly last time that she helped somebody. He's not really there to understand his death. He's more there because when he's not with her, he doesn't know where he goes. And so they just kind of offer quiet comfort to each other. It was a very cute book, but I felt like climax of it could have been done better, especially since they were so in love by the end. It wasn't as eventful as I thought it should have been. So I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars, but the vibes for fall are there. So go ahead and read this. The next one is in the Chestnut Spring series. I'm sure you guys have heard of it, but it's by Elsie Silver. A small town romance. I like the setting a lot. It's very much like farm, country, small town. It's very cool. This one is an age gap romance and it's between Beau and Bailey. So Beau he's regarded as like a war hero. He just came back. He was injured pretty badly and is now trying to integrate back into regular life, and he's finding it a little bit more difficult than he thought it would. Bailey is known in her town as somebody who is unreliable and very shady, not because of anything she did, but because her father and her brothers are horrible people. And so she lives on their land, she's beholden to them, and she has a really bad reputation, but she works at a bar that Beau frequents a lot. So Beau and Bailey end up striking this fake fiance type of relationship to get both their families off their backs. I think this book was cute. I think that the smut was great. You know I love an age gap romance. But I think that development of their relationship as well as the conflict could have been done better. Like I feel like the conflict was just stupid. 3.75 stars. The next book that I read was The Tragedy of Felix and Jake by J. Daniels. I do love J. Daniels books, and so I picked this up thinking I would get a very similar feel. No. This book is really dark. It deals with drug addiction and alcohol addiction, all about a guy, Jake, who just relapsed because he figured out that his girlfriend cheated on him and left him while he was serving in the military. And so his brother, who is a main character in another one of her books, takes him back home to get sober, and so he gets a sponsor, and his name is Felix. Felix got into drugs and alcohol because his family was extremely abusive and neglectful. He sobered up, became a sponsor, and he decides to sponsor Jake. Now, it's kind of controversial that they end up in a romantic relationship because you're not supposed to do that with your sponsor. It's kind of about them both dealing with this relationship while hoping that they can stay clean because they're not at a state where they're confident in their ability to stay sober. I gave it 3 stars though because this book just had me kind of bored. I started it in February and I put it on pause, and then I started it again in October. Like something about it was off. Some of the scenes were just weird. Minor spoiler. They take Jake to rehab at the end of the book, and before they get there, like they're going on this road trip, him and Felix go and get it on in a bathroom, and some guy like starts hearing them and starts jacking off to them having sex in the bathroom, and then Jake beats him up and Felix steps in and they get all bloody, and I was like, was all of this necessary, like before you're taking him to rehab? Like what the hell? And then they're like laughing and giggling like it was a little like cutesy thing. Like what? No, you just fought with someone in the bathroom. Very odd. This book, so cute. So this one is super spooky, very cutesy. It's Morbidly Yours by Ivy Fairbanks. This is a standalone. I personally love this book because it is the best example of soft boy that I've ever read, and Callum is like this cute soft boy that I love so much. Callum is 34 years old. He's a mortician and he owns a funeral home. This whole book is actually set in Ireland. Callum is Irish and he was left this funeral home by his grandfather, but there's a clause in it that says that he has to be married by 35 in order to inherit the funeral home, or it goes to Callum's father, who's an asshole. He is extremely worried because he's never been in a serious relationship. He is demisexual and he just doesn't click with people like that unless he is feelings for them. And also he is very much a socially anxious loner. He just doesn't want to go out. He doesn't really have a bunch of friends. He's very much keeps to himself type of guy. Lark is the complete opposite. She is bubbly sunshine. She's super extroverted, but she's running away from her past in Texas. Her husband died in a car accident. She moves to Ireland to take a job there, only for temporary. Unknowingly, she moves across the street from Callum. She didn't know it was a funeral home, but she gets a package accidentally and gives it to him, and she meets Callum and kind of forces him to be her friend. I included this book in my Taylor Swift 1989 recommendations because I feel like this book is the best example of You Are in Love by Taylor Swift. It is so adorably cute how their friendship develops. Yes, they enter a sexual relationship, but they are best friends first and foremost. They drive each other home, they make popcorn for each other, they spend every night together, they watch movies together. It was so wholesome and adorable, their relationship. I can't even really describe it. They were like, this is a person I care about so much, and I need to preserve that. And I really, really rarely find sweet, sweet books like this. So I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was the 4th book in the Lost and Found series by Catherine Cowles. It was called Shadows of You. This one was about Aspen and Roan. Aspen is actually on the run with her daughter, and they're hiding from her daughter's father, who was convicted of murdering her mother. Aspen's actually her aunt, but she still calls her her mom because she did raise her. And Roan is part of the main family, but so something bad happened in the town where this girl was shot. Roan was accused of the one shooting her, and he didn't do it, by the way, but like it went so horribly that people beat him up in the street. It's about him kind of like accepting that he can care about people because he really keeps everyone at a distance, even his family. And meanwhile, Aspen and her daughter, like they need stability and he needs to help them as they're having some issues. And so it's about the two of them trying to combine their lives together. I think this book, it had all the right elements because I love single parent, I love I Hate Everyone But You, I love Grumpy Sunshine. It just wasn't fully fleshed out. The tension almost came out of nowhere. So I gave it 2.5 stars because it had all the elements I wanted. It just didn't work out. This next book that I read is Reckless. It's actually number 4 from the Chestnut Spring series. Don't ask me why I read book number 5 before book number 4. This couple was the best couple in the series. Let me say that again. They were the best couple in the series, and I never saw that coming because I did not like this girl. She was in the other book. So book is about Winter, and she is coupled with Theo. Now Winter is actually the sister of Summer, okay, and they actually had a very back and forth relationship. As children, they were very much pitted against each other, and therefore Winter was prefaced as like this big bitch in her sister's book. Winter actually just left her husband. She found out that he basically coerced her sister into a relationship when she was super young. He dumps him. She realizes that she wants to work at a hospital closer to her sister and have a relationship with her, so she moves to the town that they're in. And Theo is a bull rider and he's a prodigy of her sister's fiance. So the two of them meet. They don't really get along right away, but they decide to have a one-night stand. Theo and Winter sign a contract and they're like, one night only. We don't talk about this after it happens. But Winter gets pregnant. Winter tries to contact Theo many times and he doesn't respond. So she raises the baby without him, and he finds out a year later that he is a baby that he knew nothing about. It's definitely a miscommunication trope. Loved this book so much. The way that they balance each other out was so good. Black cat girlfriend and golden retriever boyfriend. And also because Winter really did do a redemption arc for herself. I can't believe she ended up being like my favorite couple in there and my favorite character, because at first she was like nothing redeemable about her, and she really did a 180. She did that work, and she became a really good sister and a really good friend. 4 stars to that book. Very surprised me. The last book that I read in October was Role Playing by Kathy Yardley. Now, I was really intrigued by the premise of this book. Not only is it about an older couple, not old, but like the woman is 48, the guy is 50. Now, that's not old. I feel like romance books aren't written about people at that age. They're really written about people who are like teenage, 20s, early 30s. Like I feel like that's when the romance genre really resides, but they met because they were playing a video game. Maggie is a very grumpy black cat type of girl. She's 48 years old and she just sent off her only child to college, and so she's kind of living on her own, but she's kind of a hermit. Aiden is 50 years old. He's an optimist, but he's kind of dealing with a lot right now because his mother is declining in health and his brother refuses to help, so he's kind of under a lot of stress. So the two of them turn to online gaming for very different reasons, but they actually get along really well online. But there's kind of a miscommunication because Maggie thinks that Aiden is this like college kid. Aiden thinks that Maggie is like this elderly lady, but they end up having this very cute relationship. First it's online, then it's in person, and it was like a very awesome dynamic. And I also think it was a great premise how they met. Like, you don't normally read about people who meet through video games, but I love the premise of like meeting through online chatting. I love it. I always am such a sucker for it. It's like one of my faves. I really like this one. I thought it was cute. It definitely gave me autumnal vibes because they're in this like farm town, like, and the environment was just very cozy. So I ended up giving it 3.75 stars. Those are all the books that I read in September and October. They were very autumnal and spooky. I think I was just in the mood because I really do love fall. It really is such a vibe being able to read these types of books in the fall time when the weather's just a little bit crisper and you get to wear sweaters and not be sweaty. I'm trying to really enter my fantasy era, especially since I just read Iron Flame. I don't know, I feel like that really got me back into the world of fantasy when I've just been residing a lot in like strict romance books. So if you guys have any fantasy slash spooky slash fall reads, please drop them down below. I'm always on the lookout. I love you guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Look at her style from the street. Look at her style from the ghetto. This I will never make it big. Me, I tell them say, oh no.
Cutesy mystery setup, but it's like quirky. Yeah. So it's like this. Yeah.